What is up, Rad Potential YouTube? Welcome to today's Radformational video. This is going to be a pretty quick, down and dirty video on converting your GSLSE RX7 to a carburetor. So, 1984, 1985, Mazda released a GSLSE model of the RX7. It came with a 13B, says RE EGI on the top of the engine. I have a couple manifolds laying around here. Dig one out. Should have prepared, maybe had this out beforehand, but honestly, if you're watching this video, you probably know what the GSLSE manifold looks like. See the RE EGI on that thing? Oh, I'm gonna knock everything off of my shelf. Okay. So that's the RE EGI throttle body style fuel injection. It's got a mass airflow sensor, 2 injectors down in the engine. Okay, in the center iron. And these EFI systems, well, they're 40 years old. Injectors would have been right in here under this block-off plate. And these EFI systems don't work that great. I spent probably close to a year trying to sort out a stock EFI setup on my rally car. This is a 1984 GSLSE. And I wanted to maintain the stock EFI. It's what been ran on the car for most of its life as a rally car, for stock GSLSE 13B. Well, I was having issues. It was flooding. It was being all sorts of dumb. Wouldn't want to start. Wouldn't want a hot start. Wouldn't want a cold start. And it was really just driving up the wall. So we converted it to a carburetor, and I'm going to outline everything that I did that you need to change on your car, wiring, fuel pump, all that stuff. So we're just going to go ahead and start at the engine block. All right. In the engine bay, you need to first remove all of the EFI. Okay, so the lower intake manifold, most likely. It's a 6-port engine, so you need to remove your 6-port sleeves from the block. And then you need to install the carburetor of your liking on the car. So I have a Weber 48 IDA on my car with a Racing Beat lower intake manifold. There's a bunch of different carburetor setups you can get. You run a side draft, run the downdraft, you can run a Holly, you can run a Holly Sniper EFI. The same place, the Holly Sniper EFI, this is going to be a great video. If you are installing a Sniper on a GSLSE, things you need to change. Once you've installed the carburetor of your choosing, you need to figure out the throttle cable. Okay, a 13B throttle cable is too short to really do anything. Literally, it's tiny. It's maybe 26 inches long. The 12A throttle cables are much longer than a 13B throttle cable. I opted to go with a Mr. Gasket universal throttle cable. You can get it from Summit Racing, $35. You can still buy a 12A throttle cable, brand new, from Mazda for like $40. They're literally the same price. I just preferred to be able to have a little more adjustability than what the 12A cable is set up for. But if you buy a 12A cable and you have like a Racing Beat, Holly, whatever, the 12A cable is what that system's designed to, and then you would just adapt this throttle cable to meet that system. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to install a low-pressure fuel pump. Okay, I'm going to put some video in from whenever I installed that on this car. We're not going to crawl into the car right now. I've installed a Carter low-pressure fuel pump. Okay, it only pumps out 4 psi. You're going to need a fuel pressure regulator for that as well. I opted for an inline setup. Some setups might need a return. Consult the recommendations for your carburetor. Okay, got to get that installed. My way to do it, I maintained the factory fuel pump wiring from the GSLSE. Okay, so we've kept the factory wiring, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. Nice segue, right into wiring. The entirety of your engine harness, okay, the whole thing can come out. You're going to come down into your car under the passenger footwell. Right here in this big empty space in my car is going to be a ECU, a relay block, ambient air temp sensor, the fuel pump relay. That's all going to live right down here on a little plate. And I'll show you the one from this car. So this is that plate right here. N304 ECU. Unplug that, throw it in the dumpster. You're going to take this wiring harness, which is the GSLSE engine wiring harness, okay? This is the whole thing. I'm telling you, the whole thing. And I wouldn't throw it in the dumpster because some poor soul may try to make his GSLSE EFI work, and maybe you can be more successful than me. But I have one. If you need it, holla. So you can remove that. Now, on the GSLSE, right, we're talking about fuel pump wiring. Okay, on the GSLSE, the fuel pump is controlled by that ECU. Okay, so it comes on when the car is cranking, it stays on when the engine is running, and it primes itself. When you turn the key on, it turns that on, etc. Right? When you remove that, you've removed the car's communication to the fuel pump. So when you turn the key on, the fuel pump will not come on. All right? Even if it's still plugged in, even whatever. Here's how you fix that. The plug that plugs into this fuel pump relay, okay, it's a 6-pin connector. I've got it right here. Excuse my hasty electrical tape. You can see that I have one wire running into that plug, right? The top right connector. Now, that blue wire, okay, in that plug is the same blue wire that turns your fuel pump on, that runs all the way through the harness, through the dash, through the whatever, down the side, and comes out back here. It turns on your fuel pump. So you need to power that wire, okay, in order to make your fuel pump come on without the stock harness. Now, the factory GSLSE ECU gets its 12-volt power, okay, not from the body harness. You would think it would get it from under the dash. However, it actually gets power from out here. So on the body harness out here, you can see there's a big yellow connector right here. It's yellow. This yellow connector has 4 wires in it. That connector plugs into the engine harness at this plug right here, okay? This would be where the firewall grommet would go, okay? So if you're looking at this, the left half of this is inside the car, the right half of this is outside the car. This yellow connector. The wires from this yellow connector go into the car, to the ECU, and then to the body harness connector, okay, because this big harness plugs into the body harness, and that's what powers your fuel pump. Now, all you simply need to do is grab one of the wires from that yellow connector, put a spade in it, run that wire into the car. You can reuse your grommet into there. You could literally just do it like this. I've added some extra stuff, and you could simply connect the yellow plug from out there to the fuel pump out, okay, on this white plug that came from your fuel pump relay. That will turn the fuel pump on with the key. The fuel pump will stay on, no matter what, if the key is on, okay, if you do that. So if you've hooked it up that way, as soon as you kick the key on, fuel pump comes on. It stays on forever. That's how old, like a 1979, 1980 cars, that's how those are wired with the Nicky. You can leave it like that. I prefer to not have it hooked up like that. And that really stems from my racing background and prepping my old RX7 for racing. FIA, okay, regulates that your fuel pump shut off should the engine die. Reason being, you roll the car, flip it over, whatever, and engine dies, right? Key stays on because you flew out the window or something. It's going to keep pumping fuel out the carburetor vent, just pumping fuel constantly till it starts on fire and does whatever, or you turn the key off, right? So, you can buy 2 ways to do this. You either buy a controller, little electronic thing that controls the fuel pump based on ignition, and that shuts it off as soon as the engine dies, or you do what I've done, which I hooked up a oil pressure switch. Okay, so most old hot rods have an idiot light for oil pressure, meaning whenever you lose oil pressure in your engine, a red light comes on in the dash to say, hey, it's going to blow up, turn it off. Now, take one of those switches, it's probably 2 psi, run it to a relay, and my fuel pump comes on, okay, when it sees oil pressure. Once oil pressure goes away, fuel pump turns off. So that's what this sandwich plate and this little sensor right here is for. Now, that sensor, Carter, the same company that sells this fuel pump, sells that sensor, has a 3rd wire on it. And you're supposed to hook up the 3rd wire on that sensor to your starter signal. Okay, so when you are cranking the car, what that does is makes the fuel pump work. Now, in efforts to simplify the wiring on this car and make it easier so that you can crank it with the fuel pump off in case you have a flood, in case you have it like the engine's flooded and whatever, I have simply wired up my fuel pump. Okay, you can hear the relay click, right, to this little nitrous button right here. Now, the fuel pump won't come on unless the key is on. That is correct. You have to have the key on to make it work. But I have a prime. Okay, so when you crank the car, my fuel pump's not on until it sees oil pressure. That's a little bit extra. You don't necessarily have to do that, but that's how I've tackled it. The wiring is literally super simple. One wire. That's all you got to connect. Remove all the EFI stuff. On an 8485 car, your gauges will still work. Okay, it pulls the tach signal, it pulls the oil pressure, it pulls temperature. All of that signal comes from the chassis side. So the driver's side, the chassis harness on that side. If you have, and this is just if you're watching this video, a little tidbit of information. If you have, say, an 84 or 85 carbureted car, okay, they have a big emissions control unit down here. It's not an engine control unit, it's an emissions control unit. That control unit, the harness that comes out of the side of the car on that car has all the gauges in it. So if you're working on an 84, 85 carbureted car and you want to delete a whole bunch of stuff, go look at the Holley Sniper series on the channel, and that'll outline what wiring you can remove and keep on your engine to make sure everything else works. Okay, it's very important. That's pretty much it. All you need to put a carburetor on your car. I kept the stock fuel lines under the car. On a GSLSE, your ignition is controlled completely separately from the ECU. The ECU simply sees the tach signal. Okay. On this side of the car, these two little relays right here, right? These two relays are your injector relays. You have to keep these on in order to get power out of that side. So these are almost like fuel pump relays in a sense. Also, doing the wiring like this, you do not need to put a fuse in that jumper wire, okay? You don't need to fuse it from the yellow connector to the white connector. Reason being, you're maintaining the stock fuel pump power. It's already fused. Your fuse block under the dash has a fuel pump fuse. It's on the ignition circuit. So if anything does go wrong, it'll blow that fuse. You don't need to add the redundancy. So that's pretty much it. It is currently the night before New Year's right now when I'm filming this video. So I want to make sure you guys have a wonderful, or had a wonderful New Year, and I'm stoked for 2022. So get ready. Hopefully this brought some good info to you. And if it did, definitely comment below if you have questions. And feel free to subscribe to the channel. It's free. There's tons of RX7 info on the channel. Search it, find it. I usually try to make all my videos pretty easy, searchable titles for what gets accomplished in the video. And I'd love to have you guys stick around and learn something. So thank you guys very much for watching. Keep it rad. See you in the next one. Buddy, come here. You want to sit? You jump? That was a weak jump. Come on, jump. Jump. There you go. Good job. Peace, guys.